I don't want to say essential, but critical. So one of the things we found is in order for moderate procrastination to fuel creativity, you have to be intrinsically motivated by the thing you're procrastinating on.
Interesting.
And so what happens is if you're bored, for example, by the topic, you're not going to open the folder. You're not going to start thinking about it at all. It's not going to begin. You're not going to do any subconscious processing. You're not going to have any unexpected connections between this topic and something else you've learned about or been curious about. If you're interested in the problem, then when you put it off, you're much more likely to still keep it active in the back of your mind. And that's when you begin to see, I imagine you could explain the biology of this. I imagine, for example, there are probably more neural networks that are connecting. You probably get access to ideas that previously would have been sort of separate nodes. And so I think that you want to know what the topic is, right? You don't want to just see the blank assignment, but you also have to find a reason that this is exciting to you. Otherwise, you're going to avoid it as opposed to letting it percolate.
That brings us to the topic of intrinsic motivation. And I'd like to link that up with the topic of performance. So when I was in university, there were many topics that I was excited to learn about, some more than others, of course. But occasionally I'd be in a class or I'd get an assignment that frankly I had minimal interest in. Never zero, but minimal interest. And as a way of dealing with that, I embarked on a process of literally lying to myself and just telling myself, okay, I'm super interested in reading this and I'm gonna force myself to be interested in reading it. And lo and behold, I would start falling in love with certain things. Maybe it was even the arrival of a word that I didn't recognize. And then I would go look it up, and I knew I was studying for the GRE at that time, so I would file that away. I still have my notebooks of all the vocabulary words that I learned in the course of my university courses that frankly made the verbal portion of the GRE look pretty easy, which if you ever try and study for that at the end, it's pretty tough to commit all those new words to memory and context. So I could find little hooks, and through those hooks, I could kind of ratchet my way into a larger interest, and then lo and behold, I'm really interested in Greek mythology, or I actually liked that one at first, but I didn't have to trick myself. But, maybe we could spend a little bit of time talking about what is true intrinsic motivation. Is it always reflexive? Can we make ourselves intrinsically motivated about a given topic or scenario or group of people? And then let's talk about how intrinsic motivation links to performance, because there's a rich literature on this, as I recall, and I remember the Stanford study of rewarding kids for things they were already intrinsically motivated to do. Maybe we could touch on that a little bit and remind people who haven't heard about it. But I'm fascinated by this topic because I feel like so much of life is about doing things that initially we don't feel that excited to do.
Yeah.
And yet succeeding in life, until you can afford to offload your administrative work to somebody else, which hopefully by now you have.
To find a way to get it done.
Right. This is fundamental to being a functional human being, frankly. Not just successful, in air quotes, but functional. We got to do stuff that we don't enjoy doing.
Yeah. So I think we can talk about a couple different ways to nurture intrinsic motivation. We could think about how the task itself is designed. We could think about reward systems, and then we could think about also the things we say to ourselves and others, which I hope are not lies, but rather persuasive attempts. Let's start on that one, actually. I don't know a lot of people who are that good at deliberate self-deception.
Well, I like to think it was only around a particular set of goal-motivated pursuits. But at that time for me also it was survival. As I mentioned, I didn't do well in high school. I really wanted to perform well in university, but I knew that working just for the grade wasn't going to carry me. Yeah. It felt catabolic. And I don't know, maybe at that age I was still in the window of heightened neuroplasticity. We know it never closes, but I think I also fell in love with the process of learning how to do what I just described.
Yeah. So I think for most people, the best method of self-persuasion is actually to convince somebody else. So I'm thinking of Elliot Aronson's classic research on cognitive dissonance, where he would ask you to go and tell somebody else a task you hated is really interesting. And if he paid you a lot to do it, you still hated the task because you had a justification. Like, I got $20 to kind of fib a little bit about this task. The task is bad, but I did it for the payment. When he paid you $1 to go and tell somebody that you loved a task that you didn't, you ended up liking it more.
Wow. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but maybe you should tell me why I shouldn't be surprised. Because I hope people got what you just said very clearly. If they didn't, if you don't like doing something, going and reporting to somebody else how great that thing is, so lying about it to somebody else, is one way to increase the degree to which you like or enjoy that behavior or topic. And if you're paid $20 to go lie to somebody in the positive direction, so against your true belief, it's less effective in shifting your underlying affect about that thing, your emotions, than if you're paid less, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, I think obviously in the experiment, lying was an easy way to show the effect. But in real life, I think the way that you want to apply this is to say, all right, I've got to find something about this task that's interesting to me. And then in the process of explaining it to somebody else, I'm going to convince myself because I'm hearing the argument from somebody I already like and trust. And I've also chosen the reasons that I find compelling as opposed to hearing somebody else's reasons. And so I think this goes to the point that you were making, which is if you're trying to find a hook to make a topic intriguing, you've got to figure out, okay, what is it that would make this fascinating to me? And in a lot of cases, what you're looking for is a curiosity gap. I think social scientists like to talk about curiosity as an itch that you have to scratch. So there's something you want to know and you don't know it yet. So I would say, I tell my students often, like, take your least favorite class and find a mystery or a puzzle, like something that you just do not know the answer to. I've talked with our kids about this. Like, what really happened to King Tut? Do you know? Can you get to the bottom of that? And all of a sudden you're like, I wonder. I need to Google it. And then I need to see if Wikipedia has credible information on this. And the more you learn about that, the more intriguing it becomes. And I think that's the beginning of the process of finding intrinsic motivation.
I see. So inherent in your answer is the idea that there's something wired into our neural circuits and therefore psychology that curiosity as a verb, the act of being curious and seeking information and I should say, I define curiosity, and hopefully you'll disagree with me or agree. Either way, it doesn't matter as long as we can get a bit deeper understanding. I define curiosity as a desire to find something out where you are not attached to a particular outcome.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. In psychology, it's typically defined as just wanting to know. Mm-hmm. And that means you're driven by the question, not a particular answer, which is exactly what you're driving at.
Okay, great. So, and I think it was Dorothy Parker that said, the cure for boredom is curiosity. There's no cure for curiosity.
As there shouldn't be a cure for curiosity.
Right. So, and by the way, folks, we don't know what neural circuits subserve curiosity in the brain. It's got to be a distributed network. There's no brain area for curiosity, but it's got to be linked up with the reward systems of dopamine, et cetera, in some way, because when one discovers something new that satisfies some curiosity, it's clearly there's a internal reward there. Okay, let me back up. So if your child or an adult is dreading exploring a topic or going about an assignment of any kind, you will give them a question that they then need to resolve. What if the assignment is like rake the leaves off the front lawn? Do you say, count the leaves? Or, I mean, how does one get past the sort of procrastination and generate some intrinsic motivation for things that one dreads, where it's unlikely that they're going to discover some knowledge that's exceedingly useful for future? You
always start with okay, what's the first experiment I can run? Find the most interesting looking leaf for your favorite leaf, and then that lasts for about 2 minutes, and okay, now what? We still have a lot of leaves there.
Right.
I think not all tasks can be made intrinsically motivating to everyone. And so when intrinsic motivation is difficult to find, what you want to substitute with is a sense of purpose. Maybe a better way to say that is when the process is not interesting to you, you need to find a meaningful outcome. So there's some research on the boring but important effect, where kids who have a purpose for learning, this goes through high school, and think, this is not just interesting to me, but I'm going to be able to use this knowledge to help other people one day. They're more persistent in their studying. They end up getting better grades. And so I think intrinsic motivation is often driven by curiosity about the how. A sense of purpose comes from really thinking hard about the why. Why does this matter? And so I'd say with the raking leaves, let's try to connect that task to something else that you care about. Are you going to pleasantly surprise your parents when they get home? Are you going to have a place to play soccer that you didn't before? And I think then the process of getting to that, I guess what I'd say is, like, if you're trying to motivate yourself, it's a little bit harder than if you're trying to motivate somebody else on this. If I was going to motivate somebody else, I would take a page out of the motivational interviewing playbook, where I would say, okay, Andrew, actually, let's play this out for a second. So you're going to rake a pile of leaves. It's a 2-hour task. 0 to 10, how excited are you about that?
A 3.
3? Really? Mm-hmm. I'm surprised. I thought you were going to say 0 or 1. Why is it not lower?
I like any sort of physical activity because it allows me to move, and I just like moving my body.
There we go. Okay, so you just identified a potential source of purpose for that activity. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a vested interest in convincing you to do this task. I am genuinely curious about what would motivate you to want to do it. And as you start to articulate it, boom, self-persuasion kicks in.